from the BBC World Service in association with ABC and All India Radio. This is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell in London. Those players who have come back from the IPL are in quarantine here. We're inching closer to the start of the international season in June. I've had a busy week in meetings and projects around the voluntary roles that I'm involved in, and I took possession of a new guitar, which I've really enjoyed having some time to play before the test matches kick in here.
Just on a sad note, Jim Maxwell here in Sydney, we've lost two of the more passionate correspondents and bon vivants in the world of cricket in the last week at Alison's end, and he was very important in the Cricket Writers Society. Murray Hedgecoe, aged 90, he's left us. And in Australia, just recently, Brian Mossop died just recently. So a tribute to them and their contribution, wonderful contribution, most charming people, and it's sad that we have lost them.
Yeah, well, the news from India is continues to be bleak. Hello, this is Charu Sharma from Bangalore for All India Radio. On the news is just COVID news and more COVID news, and most of it's catastrophic and just very depressing. And particularly around Bangalore, which continues to be one of the hottest spots for positive cases for COVID, which is just terrifying, really, in many ways. And Jim, you mentioned a couple of those who are no longer with us. I must quickly mention that Veda Krishnamurthy, India's female cricketer, has lost not only a mother but a sister as well to COVID. And then recently, Chetan Sakaria, who played in the IPL, and the rather better-known Piyush Chawla, both have lost their father. So there's a fair amount of outpouring of grief from the cricketing community.
Yeah, our thoughts are with all those who have lost loved ones. Now, we'll start the show this week with a really interesting point. Scientists at the University of Cambridge in England have been looking into the materials used to make cricket bats, and they suggest that bamboo, rather than traditional willow, would make the sport more sustainable and also more accessible. Now, I've been speaking to Doctor Darshil Shah, former Thailand under-19 player who co-authored the research, and he's been telling me more about this research project and how it came about.
So I work at the Centre for Natural Material Innovation at the Department for Architecture at Cambridge, and we work with a range of different natural materials as sustainable and high-performance innovative alternatives to conventional materials. So we look at timber and bamboo as alternatives to concrete and steel for constructions, and this was a slightly unusual study for us in the sense we are looking to replace an already natural material, willow, with another natural material, bamboo. Some of the interests came because I am a cricketer myself, so it was kind of a pet project, but also because there is quite a bit of shortage of willow, and there are some problems associated with it. And with the reach of the game increasing, I used to play for Thailand a very long time ago. And with the spread of the game into Mexico, Argentina, the UAE, China, Japan, and all of these fantastic countries joining in to celebrate the game, and widening participation becomes quite important. And therefore, the supply of willow and the cost of cricket bats becomes a challenge. And also some of the sustainability aspects, because it is primarily or predominantly English willow that is used for cricket blades.
I'll come to the laws of the game in the moment about the material of the bat, but on a performance aspect then, how did bamboo compare to willow?
So there are a couple of things. Firstly, the overwhelming feeling when one lifts the bamboo cricket bat.
Oh, showing me one on the screen. I like this. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's quite heavy. It's 40% heavier than a usual willow bat. And that is usually the first overwhelming feeling. And that can influence the decision-making of certain players. Some people don't like heavier bats. But the performance-related aspects that make this a great example of material innovation is the sweet spot, in that the sweet spot is sweeter. So the bamboo as a material transfers energy more efficiently to the ball than willow would. The sweet spot is larger in its size as well. So it's a bit harder to miss time shots or easier to time shots. And also
bowlers aren't liking the sound of this.
The sweet spot is also lower, so it's closer to the toe of the bat, but therefore it may be more suitable in the subcontinent where the ball bounces lower, probably not in Australia or New Zealand where the ball is going to be jumping quite high.
So you're pleased with the performance of it cricket-wise. You believe there are sustainability benefits. However, the laws of the game, managed by the MCC, the guardians of the law, state that the blade of the bats must consist solely of wood. And in fact, bamboo is a grass, isn't it? And also the bats are laminated, is that right? So there's a pretty big obstacle there. Have you spoken or are you planning to speak to the MCC to show them your findings specifically?
We haven't spoken to them. We will be very keen to speak to them. And I think they're going to be looking at this in their next subcommittee meeting, for example. And we always knew that changing the MCC regulations would be a long shot. I think getting the bamboo passed would be quite straightforward, particularly because Malaysian cane and natural rubber are used in the handle, for example, and these are laminated and glued with PVA glue, for example. But I think it's predominantly the lamination aspect that may be the challenge. But as part of increasing the access and of the sport is concerned, perhaps these sorts of bats may be more suitable for junior level cricket or in schools, for example, to improve the health of kids and the uptake of the sport in physical education, for instance, but also considering the use of these materials in possibly training conditions, because the heavier bat may be suitable for coaching.
Next, we know, of course, the laws of the game can be varied by playing conditions, country to country and tournament to tournament even. What about willow then, going back to that, because all these things are part of a wider industry. Cricket balls, leather comes from cows. There's the meat industry, leather being a byproduct. There is all sorts of things tied up. What else is willow used for? If, say, further down the line, cricket bats, less willow was used, which is the sustainability part coming into it. But what knock-on could that have on the other uses that willow is currently used for?
Well, there are quite a few species of willow. The only species that is used in cricket bats is the Salix alba specific variety. But I do not think the love for willow is going to go away in any way. And as we've mentioned a number of times, as I think the bamboo is predominantly to supplement the supply and to offer a low-cost alternative, at least in the early stages potentially, or when a player wants to use that sort of material.
So as a former cricketer yourself, and you mentioned Thailand under-19s, if a bamboo bat had been available for you to use then, would you have been happy to use one?
Definitely. If I was allowed to use it, I think I would go for it. I have preferred heavier bats generally anyways, and you would expect me to say yes, wouldn't you?
Naturally. Darshil, thanks so much for joining us on Stumped. Fascinating study, and we'll look with interest to see where it goes.
Thank you very much.
So that's Dr. Darshil Shah, who was involved in the research. It's a really interesting area, and, why not constantly question and look to innovate, particularly as technology advances? I mean, who would have thought that we would have been playing test cricket with a pink ball? Although many would say the jury is still out on the effectiveness of that. But yeah, we've had bats made of other materials in the past, haven't we? Jim famously, Dennis Lilly, with his aluminium bats. I mean, is this just opening up a healthy debate?
What I'd be interested to know is the difference in cost of manufacture between bamboo and willow, because one of the most injurious costs that cricketers have to bear is buying bats. That's probably because Sachin Tendulkar and all the other famous people are making a pile of money by having their names attached to all these bats. But when it comes to cost, if it can be established that it's much cheaper with bamboo, perhaps there's a road to be pursued. But I think from what he was saying, the trampolining quality of the bat, even though it's heavier, may cause, as you suggested, the bowlers' union to strike and strike very soon, because it sounds to me as if that ball is going to ping off the bat a bit like a golf ball does off of those trampolining metal drivers that everyone uses. So, I think as a sort of practice developmental area of the game, bamboo's got a future, but as a regular tool for conduct, for playing the game, not so sure.
Darshil makes several good points. For starters, I do think he's onto something very important, which is the continuing availability of English willow, because surely they are not enough for a growing game, and cricket must grow. So I think there'll be severe stress on the supply of English willow. Of course, as you may know, there's Kashmir willow as well, which we tend to use in India and goes to other parts of the world as well. Now, that too is generally heavier than English willow, and which is why it hasn't really taken off, because the weight of the bat is a key element. And Darshil does suggest that bamboo is 40% heavier and could be a better training tool. I think quite the reverse, because when people are 10, 12, 13, heavier bats are going to cause a lot of injury as well. So I'm not so sure about heavier bats unless they can be shaved, in terms of the weight and still have the same efficacy. I'm actually looking forward to more innovation in cricket balls, so that if the bowlers have a little more advantage, I think it'll be better for the game.
Well, it's often a disruption to the market, isn't it, which then causes perhaps a change in law or that innovation to take on. And it was the aluminium bat that led to the change in law to say that the blade of the bat shall be made solely of wood. You heard then, and we know that bamboo bats aren't currently legal because bamboo is a grass, but the MCC laws manager, Fraser Stewart, has said that MCC are interested in hearing more about how cricket generally could become more sustainable. Have a listen.
That is an area that really interests us in this research, actually, the whole sustainability angle. And all sorts of different woods have been tried by bat makers over the years, but none are as good as English willow. So MCC will look to engage with these researchers to learn more about the cost differentials from willow and the techniques involved in making this a bat. And whilst it may be unlikely that the laws change to see bamboo bats being used in test matches anytime soon, if this research could help to create cheaper bats for lower levels of the game, particularly for children and those in less wealthy countries, then it's certainly something that is worth exploring.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is the effectiveness of the bat, isn't it, at a professional level? But yeah, accessibility, if it is cheaper. And we know that laws of the game can be adapted via playing conditions, can't they? And so if bamboo does turn out to be cheaper, if it's more widely accessible and it works for certain levels of the game, why not?
I wonder if they can lower the weight, which is the key here. And also, I mean, I'm not taking decisions for the ICC, but I do think that, if it's classified as a natural material, maybe bamboo can qualify rather than getting into the semantics of whether it's wood or grass.
Just incidentally, Tanya Aldred wrote a really good piece in this year's Wisden Almanac about sustainability around travel, in particular in cricket, if you can get your hands on that. And another point of interest is that I've seen that the Extinction Rebellion, the cause highlighting climate change, they formed their own cricket team, and therefore using cricket as a vehicle to demonstrate the seriousness of the climate crisis. Cricket, should it be a vegan sport, the use of leather and the whys and wherefores? So the sustainability question is an ongoing one, but certainly one that we'll return to here on Stumped.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on All India Radio.
Now, India's men have named their test squad to play in the World Test Championship final against New Zealand and also the test series that follows against England. I'll come to names who have missed out in just a moment, but Charu Ravi Jadeja, Hanuma Vihari and Mohammad Shami are all back after injuries in Australia. That's a big boost, isn't it?
Without question. They're all match winners in their own right. Certainly Jadeja and, of course, Mohammad Shami. I mean, no disrespect to the rest. But unfortunately, KL Rahul is still on the injury list, which is a bit of a worry. And, of course, so is Wriddhiman Saha, although I wonder if he will get a game or so or not. But it's a huge squad, as you can imagine, because of the quarantine, of course, the continued series against England. And if you wish, I would certainly like to give you my opinion on it.
Well, go give it away, Charu. There's no Kuldeep Yadav either, is there? No Hardik Pandya. I think he's got a bit of a fitness issue in terms of how well he can bowl. But yes, go for it. What are your overall thoughts?
Well, yeah, those two are big names because there's no wrist spinner, no leggy. And I think the Indian leggies are the best in the world. And one of them certainly should have been included. At whose cost, I'm not so sure. But Hardik Pandya has been obviously on some kind of an injury list. He's not 100% because if he can't bowl 4 overs in an IPL match, he's certainly not going to be able to wear the load of a test match. So that's a little worrying because he is India's, I think, most go-to fast bowling all-rounder, and he can change matches with the speed of his run getting, a bit like Rishabh Pant, because both of them are fabulous, in terms of counter-attacking. So India will miss those two. But otherwise, it's fairly settled. I think what they will also, or could miss, is a lefty opener. Now, the only one really fitting the bill there was Shikhar Dhawan, and he has not been preferred. I think his experience, particularly in the World Test Championship, will be missed. So India have a little bit of a problem there. And of course, in terms of bowling all-rounders. Ravindra Jadeja, possibly the number one, maybe Ravindra Ashwin as well. Maybe India will have to bowl both of them, which means going with one batsman less. And you have these two guys who are potential all-rounders, and of course, three fast bowlers who are probably as good as any other fast bowlers in the world.
To mention Pakistan's men, Charu, they've beaten Zimbabwe 2-0 in their test series, both matches won by an innings, so something of a thrashing. That first test ended inside 3 days, the second went into a fourth at least. But former captain Rashid Latif afterwards called on Pakistan to play more tests against stronger teams. You know, we spend a lot of time on this programme, don't we, saying the higher ranked nations need to spend more time playing the likes of Zimbabwe. So what do you make of what Rashid Latif had to say?
Well, one can understand where he's coming from because, only the contests at the very highest level are applauded by the fans, truly applauded, like India and Australia and England and South Africa. But it's a mix, isn't it? I mean, all countries need to play the rest. So I think Pakistan have done very well to play against Zimbabwe. But yes, I mean, it's a fabulous team.
As we're talking about Pakistan, a nod to the PCB for introducing a parental support policy to their player contracts. This is going to allow both women and men to get paid leave, either during periods of pregnancy or upon the birth of a child. So women will get up to 12 months of paid leave, men allowed 30 days. And Charu, for a patriarchal society, this is a huge advancement, particularly for the women cricketers.
Well, patriarchal society or not, I think this is so progressive. It's fantastic. Of course, it's limited to only the contracted players. But for Pakistan to understand the needs of paternal leave, maternal leave, this is fabulous. And I think, I don't know what the rest of the world's policies are on this at this point of time, but it's a lead to follow.
Yeah, a number of countries do have parental policies, so it's fantastic to see Pakistan joining suit. Well, that's all for this week's Stumped here on All India Radio. Don't forget you can stay in touch with us throughout the week on Twitter. We're at BBCWS Sport. Make sure you use the hashtag BBC Stumped. So thanks to my co-hosts, Charu Sharma and Jim Maxwell, and of course to you for listening. See you again next week. Bye-bye.
Stumped is a BBC sport production for the BBC World Service in association with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and All India Radio.